Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a teaching with TBA Rabbinic resident Jacki Honig.
It's really funny. I was here last night with Rabbi Shapiro. I was giving the drash, and he also got up and started that Jacki is speaking, but I have the microphone, so I'm going to say something. And he came really close to what I thought I was going to say, and I was like, this is going to be terrible. And then it just happened again. Rabbi Schatz was like, Jacki's teaching, but I have the mic. And then also again, she started talking about Yitro, and I was like, oh no, she's going to take my punchline, and this is going to be the end of it. Thankfully, it's scooping. Apparently they call that scooping. Well, I almost got scooped twice this Shabbos, and I got scooped 0 times in the end, so that worked out. I am actually really kind of excited by this. Yitro is this really interesting character that we see. And there's all sorts of stuff about him and why does he get a parsha and who is he and why do we talk about him being a Midianite priest and all of these things. So we're not going to answer basically any of those questions, but they are out there. I think he's really cool that he's this somewhere between, he's a ger, so he's somewhere between a convert and a sojourner. It's unclear because biblical Hebrew, but he gets a parsha named after him, and one that's kind of a big deal. So I wanted to talk about Yitro. So we're going to do a little bit of a dive into who he is, kind of 2 lessons from him, one a lesson from him from Torah, and one sort of a modern midrash on Yitro, and where's the lesson in that. So the first thing on the source sheet is Rashi. On right at the beginning of our parsha, we're asked, one might ask, who is Yitro? So Rashi tells us, Sheva Shemot Nikru Lo. He was called by 7 names. Reuel, Yeter, Yitro, Chovav, Chaver, Keni, and Putiel. So 7 names, and it gives us the reasons. Normally, I would ask someone to read, but for the sake of Zoom, I'm sorry, you all have to just listen. So he was called Yeter, which is different from Yitro, because he added, they believe that because of him, his section was added to the Torah. Also, this is all just Rashi on it, because we will come to a slightly different answer. So we have Yitro. We have Yeter. Yitro, so he was called because when he became a proselyte and fulfilled the design precepts, one more letter was added to his name. So Rashi here is suggesting that his name was Yeter, and when he comes over to Judaism, they add a letter and he becomes Yitro, similar to what was seen with Avraham, Sarai, Sarah. Chovav, because he loved the Torah. And for sure, Chovav is Yitro. So there are questions in a couple places. Might they be talking about someone else? Are they for sure talking about Yitro? Because it says, and I'm actually going to skip it for now because I've brought all the sources. But Rashi is sure it is correct to say that Chovav is Yitro. But as to Reuel, there are some who say that he is not identical to Yitro. So Reuel is another name, and Rashi here is suggesting that maybe it's a different person overall. So he continues and he explains that, the rain, if you're on Zoom, you probably can't hear it, but the rain is picking up here. It's getting a little bit louder. And so Rashi is saying Reuel may be a different person. So I was intrigued. I have heard this before, but I've never had the sources. So I'm going to pause for a minute. Does anyone have any thoughts? Things you've learned, anything? I know we just went through a quick list, but anything coming up. Rabbi Schatz, you got to be real loud with that rain. So Rabbi Schatz mentioned that she can't think of any other characters that get as many names as Yitro, except for God, that God has all of these names and all of these different aspects, and not comparing God and Yitro necessarily, but just showing where is attention paid to that. Okay, so I went ahead and went to find all of these sources to try to find where we see these names. Maybe there's a connection, maybe we know why. So we're going to start in Exodus. They go, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they go in order that they appear mostly. They're mostly in order that they appear in the Tanakh, though there's one a little bit later that's out of order. So this is actually when we see him before this week's Parsha. When Paro learned of the matter, he sought to kill Moshe, but Moshe fled from Paro. He arrived, if you don't have a source sheet and you're in a Chumash or a Tanakh, it's Exodus 2:15-18 that I'm reading. He arrived in the land of Midian and sat down beside a well. Now, the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. They came to draw water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock, but shepherds came and drove them off. Moses rose to their defense and he watered their flock. When they returned to their father, Reuel, he said, "How is it that you have come back so soon today?" So here we see this priest of Midian with 7 daughters, and his name is Reuel, and he's equated to Jethro, but he's not called to Yitro, and he's not called that here. So that's the first time we see this priest of Midian. And so here we have, this is also still not this week's Parsha, sorry. We're in Exodus 4, verse 18. Moses went back to his father-in-law, Jether in the English, and said to him, "Let me go back to my kinsmen in Egypt and see how they are faring." And Jethro, said to Moses, "Go in peace." So here we have in one verse, we have Moshe and Yitro, and we have both Yeter and Yitro in the same verse, still all before this week's Parsha. So now we've got both. And now we have this week's Parsha. We're in Exodus still Shemot, chapter 18, verse 1. Yitro, Jethro, priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard all that God had done for Moses and for his people. And it continues on a little bit. I put some more verses because it is this week's Parsha that we just read. Yeah, that we're reading. Sorry, days get confusing with Parsha and what we read and all of that. So here we have Yitro in today's Parsha named Yitro. We're going to fast forward a book to Numbers Bamidbar 10:29, and so here's where we're going to get real confusing. Moses said to Hobab, son of Reuel the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law, "We are setting out for the place of which the Lord has said, 'I will give it to you.'" There's a little bit more in the verse, but that's his name. So here's where we get real confusing. So if you look at the Hebrew, Vayomer Moshe leChovav ben Reuel Hamidiani. So it seems clear here that he's speaking to Chovav ben Reuel Hamidiani. Choten Moshe is where we get a little confusing. Who of these people is the father-in-law of Moshe? It's a little unclear. So this is where we get kind of sticky. And so I'm going to pause there again. If anyone, what, especially that piece, maybe, especially if you're familiar with Hebrew or anything like that, I just went quickly through a lot of sources. But is anything kind of coming up? Does it feel sticky? Does it feel familiar? Does it feel, where's that sitting? You got to be real loud. Sorry, Bob. Yeah, don't apologize. So Bob's flat out claim is it's bad editing. And really is explaining is kind of you're talking about documentary hypothesis before I misquote you, which I love and I think is so interesting that all of these stories are coming out of different sources, and I'll kind of add a little bit to that they may have been different stories passed down from different people who had different names for the same person, the same way that I will fully confess, if you meet people who knew me when I was a kid, my name was Jacqueline. If you called me Jacki when I was like 5, you might as well have called me Sam or Susan. I just would not respond. And so people who know me from when I'm little still to this day call me Jacqueline. But if most of you called me Jacqueline, I would be very confused and maybe a little put off. But still there's that tradition. And so Bob is bringing in that these stories potentially came from different authors who had different traditions, but Bob, you still think they're all talking about the same person, just different people referred to him in different ways. Right. Okay, so I wish everyone on Zoom could see Bob's expression. There was a little bit of a I'm not going to do it very well, but a little bit of a sort of situation in this last one, the last one from, sorry, I flipped my sheet, from Bamidbar, where we get really confused, Chovav and Reuel, who is Reuel, father-in-law, grandfather. That's where we got really sticky on that. So probably all one person. That one muddies the water a little bit. But we've got a staked claim in same person, different stories with the asterisks of one. So the next source I think is very interesting. This one I think was my favorite. So we've got Shemot chapter 6, verse 25, and then we have Targum Yonatan on it, which I love. Sometimes Targum on Torah can be really helpful if there's a word that you don't know, and also sometimes it'll be interesting because as all translation does, all translation comes with interpretation. You have to pick a word when you've got some options. So the verse reads, and Aaron's son Eleazar ben Aaron. So Eleazar, the son of Aaron, took to wife one of Putiel's daughters, and she bore him Pinchas. So that's just the beginning of that verse. And if you look at the Targum, Eleazar ba'ar Haron. So we're definitely talking about the same guy, Eleazar, son of Aaron. Nesivle mibrato di Yitro, hu Putiale, leindu velidat le yat Pinchas. So so Eleazar ben Aaron took a wife from the daughters of Yitro. So Yonatan is saying that Putiel is Yitro, and he's drawing it straight in. If you only ever read Targum Yonatan, if this was the tradition you had grown up with, you would just know that this is the same person. So that I think is really interesting, is this kind of ancient source that's sort of unmuddying the waters for us a little bit. And then we step out of Torah. We're going to step into the rest of Nach. Sorry, my brain. I looked at the time and my brain got a little fried. So we see in Shoftim, we're going to get the last two names. We're going to get the descendants of the Canaanite, the father-in-law of Moses, went up with the Judites from the city of Psalms. So Uvnei Keni Choten Moshe. So here we're going to get Keni. We're going to get 6. And then we have the last one, Vechever HaKeni Nifrad Mikain. Now Vechever, the Canaanite, had separate from the other Canaanites, descendants of Chovab, father-in-law of Moshe. So we have one more where it looks like it might be Yitro, but then he's also descendant from Chovab. So in the Hebrew, if you look at it, Vechever hakni nifrad mikayan mipnei chovav choten Moshe. So the trope gives us a little bit of a hint of where this choten Moshe goes to. It possibly goes to Chovav, and it's possible it's referring to Chever. So we again get that little bit of muddied who's who. I think this one might be a little bit more clear, but Rashi, and also, as we'll see, Mechilta also thinks that this is a name. So I'm actually going to skip the Mechilta just for time, but it's there. And again, he's going to list all the names, and he is going to, he comes to different reasons than Rashi, but he's going to give you the same 7 names. I actually like the Mechilta's reasoning. It's also a lot shorter and a lot clearer, like 3 words at a time. Here's why he's got all these names. So now that we might or might not know who Yitro is, we're sure that he's the father-in-law of Moshe. Might have some other names, unclear. I want to talk a little bit about the story that happens in the Parsha. We didn't read it today. We'll read it on Shabbos, but the story is here. It's a great story. I'm going to summarize quickly, just again for time, but then I'll read the specific part I want to focus on. Moshe is sitting and listening to the people all day, and Yitro says, why are you sitting as all these people stand and come to you? Like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And Moses says, because God said so. When there's a problem, they come to me and I decide. So we're going to look at verse 17, chapter 18, verse 17 in Shemot, if you are not looking at the source sheet. But Moses' father-in-law said to him, the thing you are doing is not right. You will surely wear yourself out, and these people as well. But the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. I don't know about anyone else, but I love that. Like, that is a thing that I think I need in my life, and so many of us need. And it's a lesson that we see again. I've brought in Pirkei Avot. This is one of, arguably one of the more famous pieces of Pirkei Avot, if the entire thing itself is not famous. Rabbi Tarfon used to say, it is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. And so we see this wisdom from Yitro coming through all the way, all these years later, about it's too much. You can't do it. You can't do it all on your own. You don't have to do it all on your own. And yeah, I think that's a cool, we're seeing it both in Torah and Pirkei Avot of ways to live our lives. So I'm going to pause there again. I have one more lesson, time dependent. But I just want to see, like, does that resonate with people? Does that feel challenging? Does that feel easy? How does that sit? How does that feel? I don't want to call you out. Good. I got a thumbs up. Yeah. Rabbi Schatz is going to go back to Yitro. Okay. So I'm going to try to summarize this. So no, it's good. It's really good. Just, I want everyone to be able to hear it. Rabbi Schatz brings in a thought that maybe that these names are describing character traits, which I think actually is what the Mechilta is getting at. I think Rashi to some extent is touching on this, and this is really what the Mechilta is getting at, is these are character traits. And also that, like, different people, she gives the example, her father calls her one thing, her siblings call her another, versus congregants and friends and all of that. And so maybe, like, Chovav is something that Moshe calls him out of closeness or out of love. And so these names are more descriptive than prescriptive, quote. Direct quote there. But they're more descriptive than prescriptive, and they really talk about the relationship and who Yitro was as a human, or Reuel was as a human, instead of just he had 7 different names because his parents put a lot on his birth certificate, or because we didn't know who he was. Quote Rabbi Rebecca Schaff. I am going to leave you on. Oh yeah, I've got someone being voluntold that they'd like to share. Great. So we've got a kind of a summation, which is great. I think I'm gonna hold what you said for 1 second, because I'm gonna point out what the last thing is, and then I'm gonna use your summary and call it a day. I'm gonna scoop that.
Scoop David.
Yeah, although you said it first. So the last thing that I brought, which I really love, but I would encourage you to look at, is the song Through Heaven's Eyes from the Prince of Egypt, modern Midrash. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. And I brought a piece from Megillah, from Masachet Megillah, about reading Torah and how all these people are praiseworthy. And really the point in this is just about, you have to just have perspective on what people are and who's good and who's great and all of those things. And I would encourage you to read it. I think it's really interesting. If not, I wouldn't have put it on here. But what David said that I'm going to scoop and use as a conclusion is that it's really great to sit and study together, and to be able to bring these two ideas, to bring documentary hypothesis from Bob and a character explanation from Rabbi Schatz, and really bring them together, and that they're not in conflict, and that when we look at these things, it's incredible to be able to find different perspectives. And I'm going to add that this is what I love about Torah and about text study, and especially about Parsha, because we do it every year. And so we get to come back and we get to find new things, and we get to connect them in new ways. And it's this sort of spiral of learning, like math, like you used to learn 4 + 1, and then you learn 4 + -1, and it sort of spirals. And I feel like Torah often gives us the same opportunity to sit and take what we know and just keep adding to it and spiraling back around year after year. So I hope you found something new in this, and something to add from any sort of perspective. And hopefully now next Shabbos you hear the story about Yitro, aka these 6 other names, you'll have something new.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.